Hey, mop guy. Yeah, you bring that thing over here and show us what you've got. The shout cracked through the Rose District Training Center like a whip. Every head on the mat turned. Under the harsh white lights, Sensei Tyler Rhodes, black belt, local tournaments, golden boy, full-time ego machine, stood with his arms crossed and a smirk stretched across his face. He tilted his chin, eyes narrowing at the man standing quietly near the wall. I'm serious, Tyler said louder, projecting his voice so it carried past the heavy bags and the sparring cages. I bet you've never even thrown a punch in your life. Come on, show the newbies how a real man moves. The man with the mop did not react at first. Grant Ellis paused mid-swipe, leaned slightly on the handle, looked up, slow, controlled, almost reluctant. At 43, he didn't move like the younger fighters in the room. No bravado, no showmanship. Just a quiet steadiness in the way he straightened his back and adjusted his worn work gloves. He had been the night janitor at Rose District for exactly 24 days. Most nights, he worked alone, long after the final student had gone home. When only the echo of old punches and the faint smell of gym chalk kept him company. But on Thursdays, the advanced class ran late, and tonight, Tyler's ego was running even later. Grant cleared his throat.
Sensei,
He said softly, I'm only here to clean. I don't want to interrupt your class. He bent again to the mop bucket. And that. The act of quietly doing his job while refusing to feed Tyler's need for attention only made Tyler louder. Interrupt. Tyler scoffed. Buddy, the only thing you're interrupting is your chance to entertain us. Come on, step up. Let the students see the difference between a trained fighter and a guy who smells like bleach. Weak laughter rippled through the room, not because anyone truly found it funny, but because no one wanted to be Tyler's next target. A teenage boy at the edge of the mat looked uncomfortable. A 20-something woman glanced at Grant with apology in her eyes. But no one spoke. No one ever did. Tyler strutted forward, each step deliberate, tapping his belt as if to remind everyone what ranking looked like. What he didn't know. What none of them knew was that the man he mocked had once fought under a name that echoed through stadiums. A name whispered in locker rooms around the world. A name retired in tragedy. Grant. Ellis had spent 21 years trying to erase that. Name .20-1. Years avoiding rings, crowds, cameras, and the guilt that hollowed him out from the inside. The guilt tied to the night he lost his best friend. His sparring partner since childhood in a freak training accident that ended more than one life. Since then, he had sworn off fighting, sworn off the limelight. Sworn off being that man again. He lived quietly now, working 2 jobs, raising his 9-year-old daughter alone, patching together a simple life from the ruins of an old one. But that vow was about to be tested. Because when someone uses power to belittle the powerless, the part of Grant that once refused to bend began to stir awake. Come on. Janitor Tyler pressed, swaggering up until his shadow stretched across Grant's mop water. Just a tiny demo. A little fun for the class. You know what fun is, right? Grant lifted his gaze again, and this time, something in his eyes made Tyler take half a step back without realizing it. A flicker of old thunder. A memory of danger. A warning. The whole gym felt it. A ripple in the air, like pressure dropping before a storm. The chatter died instantly. Even the newest white belts sensed the shift. Grant's voice was calm when he answered. I'll step onto the mat, he said. But when we're done, you'll apologize to them. Every student in this room, because martial arts is supposed to build character, not cheap entertainment. Tyler barked a laugh, too loud and too sharp, the laugh of a man trying to cover fear with bravado. Apologize. Buddy, after I toss you across the mat, you'll be apologizing to your mop bucket, or forced giggles from the crowd. But Grant wasn't smiling. He set the mop aside, removed his gloves, 1 finger at a time, and placed them gently next to the bucket. His movements were slow, careful, deliberate, the exact opposite of a man about to embarrass himself. He stepped forward, and the dojo seemed to inhale. Few knew the truth that Grant Ellis had once been Grayson Ghost Hand Ellis reigning lightweight champion, undefeated in 27 professional bouts. Known for speed so unreal, Commentators replayed slow motion to understand what happened. He had walked away at his peak. Vanished without explanation. The world had moved on. He had tried to, but some instincts never die. They sleep, and something inside him, the part he had buried deepest, twitched awake as he stepped onto that mat. Tyler noticed it too, though he didn't recognize what it was. All he knew was that this janitor suddenly didn't look like someone who should be easy entertainment. Still, he pushed forward. "Gather around," Tyler called, clapping his hands. "Time for a live demonstration. Pay attention. This is what separates trained fighters from, well, people who work minimum wage." A low murmur of discomfort rolled through the class. A young woman, Megan, brown-haired blue belt, who trained harder than anyone else, whispered to her sparring partner, "This doesn't feel right." Her partner shook his head. "Just stay out of it." Tyler paced in front of the students, voice dripping with superiority. "Look closely, everyone. This is why we talk about hierarchy, skill, discipline. Not everyone belongs on the mat. This place is for athletes, not custodial staff." Grant felt the old ache tighten in his chest, not from the insult, but from the tone. The same tone he'd heard 22 years ago, backstage in Las Vegas. "Who does this? Nobody think he is? He's not real competition. He doesn't belong here." Those words had eaten at him. Those words had fueled him. Those words had played in the background the night the accident happened. He shook the memory away. Now wasn't the time, Tyler cracked, his knuckles theatrically. "All right, janitor. Show me your stance." Grant breathed slowly, deeply, a breath that grounded him in a way he hadn't felt in decades. And then he lifted his hands, not in an amateur's stance, not in a sloppy, awkward guard, but in a position so clean, so balanced, so unmistakably trained, that several students gasped softly. Grant's weight shifted to the balls of his feet. Relaxed, shoulders open, chest, hands hovering like they were drawing invisible lines in the air. Megan's eyes widened. "Tyler," she whispered. "He knows what he's doing?" Tyler hesitated just for a second, just long enough to reveal all his bravado. Was masking a tremor of uncertainty, but ego pushed him forward anyway. "Don't worry, folks," he said, forcing a grin. "Everyone thinks they look good in the first 5 seconds." Grant exhaled. The storm inside him, the one he'd kept buried, stretched its arms, and as the room went silent, as 30 pairs of eyes locked onto the two men on the mat, as tension thickened into something heavy enough to taste, Grant said quietly, "Let's finish this." Entire gym held its breath, because no one knew, not Tyler, not the students, not even Grant himself, how much the world was about to change, and how one man with a mop was about to remind the dojo what real power looks like. For a moment, no one moved. The mat beneath Grant's feet felt cooler than he remembered, softer, different from the vinyl floors of the professional cages he once dominated, different from the blood-stained mats of Vegas where he'd built and lost everything. Tyler stood across from him, rolling his neck like a predator preparing to pounce. But Grant saw something else. A flicker. A hesitation. The way Tyler's jaw clenched a little too long. The way his stance shifted unevenly. The way he kept glancing at his students, needing their eyes to feed his confidence. He wasn't a predator. He was a boy holding a toy gun, pretending it was loaded. Tyler raised his hands. "All right, janitor," he announced, chest puffed. "We'll start slow. I don't want to break anything you might need for mopping later." A few uneasy snickers rippled through the group. Grant barely heard them. He was watching, measuring, feeling the currents in the room. Every fighter knows. You don't listen to the taunts. You listen to the breath. And Tyler's breathing was all wrong. Grant kept his voice steady. "This isn't a fight. You said you wanted a demonstration. It'll become one if you're not careful, Tyler." Shot back, he stepped forward. Grant's body responded before thought could form, a reflex engraved in old muscle memory. A shift of weight, a lowering of the center of gravity, a soft turn of the shoulder. The class noticed it, the subtlety, the grace. No janitor moved like that. No part-time worker preparing to clean trash cans held himself like that. A whisper traveled through the half-circle of students, like a secret skipping across water. Who is this guy? Tyler launched the first move, a quick jab, meant to test distance. Grant did nothing flashy, no counterpunch, no dramatic dodge. He simply wasn't there anymore. A slight pivot, barely a step, and Tyler's fist sliced through empty air. The class gasped. Tyler blinked, startled. Lucky dodge. He tried again. This time a feint, followed by a right cross, meant to tag Grant lightly on the shoulder. The kind of move instructors use to show dominance without hurting the student. Grant didn't dodge. He read him before. Tyler's glove even fully extended. Grant's body flowed to the side, effortless, quiet. A movement so efficient, it almost looked slow. Yet Tyler's punch cut through nothing for the second time. Megan, the blue belt, whispered, "Sensei Tyler. He doesn't miss like that." Her partner swallowed. "He does now." Tyler's cheeks flushed, embarrassment creeping behind the smug mask. He stepped back, shaking his arms dramatically as if loosening up. "Fine, enough warm-up. Let's get serious." Grant tilted his head mildly. "If you insist." And that somehow made Tyler angrier. He stormed forward with a burst of speed, swinging a kick aimed at Grant's torso. It never connected. Grant's hand rose gently, not even grabbing, just redirecting, and Tyler stumbled off balance, nearly twisting himself to the mat. No force, no aggression, just skill. Raw, precise skill. Tyler recovered, panting harder now, pride unraveling with each second. "What kind of janitor moves like that?" he demanded. Grant didn't answer. Tyler threw another punch. Grant slipped it. Another Grant glided past it like wind past a tree. The room's energy shifted from amusement to awe. Even the newest students sensed the power dynamic snapping. Tyler's attacks were getting sloppier, the growing panic behind them impossible to hide. Finally, he lunged with everything he had, a frustrated, wild swing meant to prove something he could no longer articulate. Grant stepped inside the arc. A single breath, a single heartbeat, and Grant's hand touched Tyler's shoulder. Lightly, guiding him forward with perfect leverage, Tyler flew. Not far, just enough to land on his knees, sliding across the mat with a thud that echoed in the silent. The students froze. Tyler stared at the floor in disbelief. Grant didn't move, didn't gloat, didn't celebrate. He simply waited. Tyler scrambled up immediately, trying to laugh it off. "Nice trick. But you know what? Even amateurs can get lucky." Grant raised one eyebrow. Tyler said his student softly, "Maybe stay." "Out of it," Tyler snapped, voice cracking. Panic was seeping into his bravado now. He charged again. Desperate, Grant stepped aside. Tyler tripped forward. He charged again. Clinging to what remained of his ego, Grant turned his hips, letting the momentum carry Tyler past him. This time, Tyler fell harder. The class watched in stunned silence. One student whispered, "Him without even trying." Another murmured, "That's not luck. That's mastery." Tyler's breath came in ragged gasps. Sweat gathered at his temples. His black belt, the symbol he worshipped like a badge of honor, suddenly felt heavy around his waist. "Stop running," Tyler spit. "Fight me." Grant exhaled. "I'm not running," he said gently. "You're chasing." The words hit Tyler harder than any punch. Humiliation surged. Rage followed. Tyler threw a reckless, furious hook. Grant finally responded. Not with violence, not with a strike. Just a simple, elegant movement that every master learns, but few can execute flawlessly under pressure. He parried Tyler's arm with a soft tap, barely touching him. Then he stepped inside. Tyler's guard then placed one hand behind Tyler's elbow and one on his shoulder and flipped him. A controlled, safe, perfect throw. Tyler hit the mat with a sound that shook the room. Silence. Swallowed the doge, Grant stepped back, breathing steadily. "Are we done?" he asked. Tyler didn't answer at first. He lay on the mat, staring at the ceiling as if it had betrayed him. A lifetime of pride, shredded in less than 3 minutes. He struggled to his feet, face burning. This doesn't prove anything. It wasn't meant to, Grant said. You asked for a demonstration? I gave you one. You humiliated me. No, Grant replied softly. Your attitude did that. I only moved out of the way. The students shifted uncomfortably. Megan stepped forward. Sensei, he's right. You pushed him. You wanted to embarrass him. Tyler spun. You're taking a side. She looked around at the others. We all saw it. He didn't attack you once. Tyler's eyes darted around, searching for support. Finding none, Grant sighed and turned toward his mop. Lesson over, class over, he hoped. But Tyler Rhodes wasn't finished. His ego couldn't take the defeat, couldn't take the witnesses, couldn't take the reality that the man he mocked could have ended the fight at any second, but chose not to. Where are you going? Tyler barked, voice trembling with anger. We're not done. Grant paused, slowly turned back. You're angry because you've lost control of the room, Grant said quietly. But you didn't lose it to me. You lost it to your own pride. Tyler's fists clenched. Grant continued, voice low, calm, patient, in a way that made Tyler's rage ignite brighter. If you want a real fight, Grant said, you'll need to rethink what fighting means. The students looked between them, breath held. Tyler stepped forward. Grant did not move. Not because he was afraid, but because he wasn't. Tyler's voice cracked. Who are you? Grant's answer was simple and honest. Someone who tried. Very hard to stop being the man you're trying so hard to pretend to be. The dojo fell still, because everyone felt it. Something was waking inside Grant Ellis. Something he had buried for 2 decades. And this was only the beginning. For a moment, no one moved. Not Tyler, not the students, not Grant, who stood at the edge of the mat like a man remembering something heavy, something buried, so deep that even speaking it aloud might crack the ground beneath his feet. But then, Tyler smirked again, trying to reel back control of the moment. Come on then, janitor, he said loudly, forcing bravado into every syllable. Step a little closer. Let the class see your stance. Maybe if you're lucky, I'll even teach you how not to embarrass yourself. A ripple of nervous laughter traveled through the room, though this time it was thinner, less confident. Most eyes weren't on Tyler, they were on Grant. On the way the older man stood, balanced, effortless, centered in a way no beginner, no outsider, no janitor ever stood. The brown-haired girl from earlier swallowed hard, whispering to her partner, he's not normal. Look at his feet. His posture, something's off. Her partner nodded but didn't dare respond out loud. Tyler noticed too. He just couldn't admit it. Ego wouldn't let him. The slightest hesitation was always his flaw. He thought dominance was the same thing as strength. He thought fear equaled respect. Grant stepped forward. His socked feet moved over the mat without sound. If anyone had blinked, they would have missed the shift in his weight. It's the subtle rotation of his hips, the way his chin angled not high. In arrogance, not low in submission, but level, balanced, perfect. Tyler's eyes flickered for one split second. He saw it. The way trained fighters see another fighter in a crowd of strangers. An instinctive recognition. A blurry memory of moving the same way. A ghost inside the body. But then he shut it down with bravado. Good, Tyler said, clapping his hands sharply. Class, gather close. You're about to see why confidence, without training, is dangerous. Grant didn't react. Instead, he simply said, My daughter will be here soon. It was an odd, quiet statement, spoken calmly. Almost gently, Tyler scoffed. What? Afraid she'd watch you get tossed around? Don't worry, she won't see anything she hasn't seen at home, I'm sure. A few students flinched.
Ow.
The brown-haired girl actually whispered, God, that's too far. Grant's jaw tightened a millimeter. Not enough to look angry, just enough to show a line he didn't want crossed. I don't want her seeing this, Grant said, voice lower now. But you're not giving me a choice. Tyler didn't hear the warning buried inside the words. Or maybe he did and chose to ignore it. He extended his hand toward the center of the mat. Motioning as if he were inviting someone to step into a spotlight, Grant walked to the middle, and the energy in the dojo changed, softly, almost imperceptibly. Like the pressure in the air before a storm, a few students actually stepped back without realizing why. Tyler strutted forward, raising his chin as he addressed the class. Okay, folks. First rule, keep your movements controlled. I don't want to accidentally send the janitor through a wall. More weak laughter. Grant exhaled slowly. If anyone had been close enough, they would have seen his hands, trembled not with fear, but with restraint. The kind of restraint a man carries when he has spent years keeping something locked away, something sharp enough to cut him if he loosens his grip. Tyler squared up Grant simply, stood there, no stance, no guard. Just presence. Are you going to defend yourself? Tyler asked, irritation creeping in. Put your hands up, come on. It'll look ridiculous if you just stand. Grant raised his eyes, and Tyler stopped talking. There was nothing threatening in the look, nothing violent, nothing aggressive. It was worse. It was the gaze of a man who had seen the inside of cages. The kind of man who had heard crowds scream his name. It's the kind of man who had broken bones, taken beatings, survived nights that would have shattered lesser men. It was the look of someone who knew exactly what he was capable of, and had spent decades trying to forget. Tyler blinked hard, as if clearing away a trick of the light. Then, needing to prove anything, he lunged. Not fast. Not slow. Just carelessly confident, he grabbed for Grant's shoulder, expecting resistance, panic. Grant moved his foot 3 inches. That was all. His body pivoted, his hips turned, and suddenly Tyler's grip caught nothing but air. He stumbled forward, catching himself before he fell. A few students gasped. Whoa, did you see? What was that? Didn't even touch him. Tyler's face reddened. Lucky, he spat. Beginner's flinch. He tried again. This time he threw a controlled open palm push meant to off-balance Grant. Something harmless. Just enough to embarrass him. Grant didn't flinch. He stepped left. Tyler's arm slid past him, the force redirecting into nothing. Another collective gasp. Tyler snapped his head toward the class, forcing a laugh. He's slippery. That's all. Watch closely now. This time I'll break down the movement. He rushed in harder. Grant sighed. Not annoyed, just tired. Tired in a way that spoke of old memories, old regrets. As Tyler grabbed for him again, Grant finally moved. 1. Hand, feather light, barely a whisper of contact, brushed against Tyler's wrist. A shift of fingers, turn of pressure, and Tyler spun. He didn't fall, not yet, but the spin wasn't his choice. It was control. Perfect, invisible control. The students' eyes widened simultaneously. They didn't know what they saw, but they knew it wasn't normal. Tyler ripped his hand back, shaking his wrist where Grant had touched him. What was that? He snapped. Grant didn't answer. He simply said, This isn't a good idea. Is that a threat? Tyler barked. No. Grant said softly. It's the truth. The room went silent. Tyler stepped closer until he was inches from Grant. Too close. Far too close for someone who didn't fully understand the danger he was in. You think you're scaring me? Tyler hissed. You think you're impressing? Anyone. The only reason these kids look nervous is because they feel sorry for you. No one in the room felt sorry for Grant. They felt sorry for Tyler. Grant exhaled again, slow breath, as though steadying something inside him. Please, he said quietly. Stop, before I have to make you stop. That did it. Tyler shoved him hard. The impact jolted Grant backward a single step. Not because he lost balance, but because he let himself be moved for a heartbeat. The whole class froze. Grant lifted his head. His eyes changed. Not angry, not violent. Just awake, Tyler's throat tightened. But he masked it with aggression. Come on then, he yelled. Show him what you've got. Grant didn't move, but something inside him snapped, loose like a locked door creaking open after 20 years. That door had a name. Jack Morrison, his friend, his partner, the man he failed to protect, the man whose death chased him every night, Grant's. The voice was a whisper not to Tyler, but to himself. I didn't come here to fight, and louder, but you won't humiliate me again. The students leaned in, no one breathed. Tyler lunged one more time, and this time, Grant didn't step aside. He didn't dodge, he didn't run, he moved. Really moved, not the hesitant, controlled movements of before, but the real thing. A ghost of who he once was, a flash of the phantom. Tyler's wrist was caught, mid-dash strike. His balance was broken, his body lifted. Not high but enough. Enough for the entire class to see Tyler Rhodes, black belt instructor, self-proclaimed master, arrogant. Bully gets swept to the mat in one effortless motion. A thud echoed through the doge. Tyler lay there, stunned, breath knocked from his chest. Grant stepped back, posture calm again. Everyone stared. Silence swallowed the room whole. The brown-haired girl whispered the only words. Anyone could manage. That wasn't an accident. Tyler pushed himself up, face red, humiliated, furious, and Grant, calm, steady, unshaken, simply said, "We're done." But the night was nowhere near done with them, because someone had seen the entire thing. Someone standing in the doorway, someone whose eyes went wide when she watched her father do something she never thought he could do. Dad. Grant turned. His daughter Lily stood feet from the mat, and that was the moment everything changed. Lily's voice didn't ring out like a shout. It didn't slice through the air like a scream. It was soft, barely above a whisper. But in the silence that filled the dojo, it felt like the loudest sound in the world. Dad. Grant froze. His shoulders, which had been straight and centered moments ago, sagged slightly. His breath caught. And for the first time that night, his eyes filled not with focus or regret,
but with something like fear.
not fear of Tyler, not fear of fighting, fear of being seen. He turned slowly toward the doorway. Lily stood there with her backpack slung off one shoulder, wearing her favorite purple hoodie, her shoes still muddy from the walk over. Her hair was tied up the way she always did when she was rushing, crooked, messy, just barely held together by a fading pink. Scrunchy, she looked so small in that doorway, so young, too young to see the part of him he'd buried. "Lily," Grant said softly. "I thought you'd be at the library another 20 minutes. I walked fast," she said, stepping into the room. "But, Dad, what were you doing?" The question wasn't sharp. It wasn't accusing, it was confused, concerned, and that made it hurt worse. Grant swallowed. "I didn't want you to see that." The students watched the scene unfold like they were witnessing the end of a movie they didn't understand. Tyler, still on a knee on the mat, blinked hard and scrambled to his feet, trying to reclaim whatever ego he had left. Well, Tyler said with a strained laugh, brushing off imaginary dust. "Looks like the janitor has fans." No one laughed this time, not a single student. Even Tyler noticed. But instead of stopping, he pushed harder, trying to claw back dignity. "Perfect timing, kiddo," he said, forcing another laugh. "You just saw your dad get a little too excited and stop talking," Lily said quietly. Her voice was soft, but firm. Everyone turned. Tyler blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said stop talking to my dad like that." Grant's heart clenched. "Lily, no," she said, stepping closer to him. "He didn't do anything wrong. You were the one yelling at him." The entire room went still. Tyler opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Not because he didn't have a comeback, but because he suddenly felt the eyes of every single student burning into him. Waiting to see what he'd do next, Grant put a gentle hand on his daughter's shoulder. "It's okay," he murmured. "Let's go home." But Lily didn't move. She looked up at him, her big brown eyes filled with confusion and a worry he hadn't seen since the night she found him crying alone in the kitchen, thinking she was asleep. "Dad, why did you do that?" she asked. In a trembling voice, "You'd always tell me to walk away from bullies," Grant exhaled. How could he explain that some bullies didn't stop when you walked away? How could he tell her that some lines couldn't be crossed, that some wounds from the past never fully healed? He crouched down to her level. "Lily," he said softly, "I didn't want to fight him. I told him that." But he wouldn't stop, pushing, Her eyes flicked to Tyler, who, despite standing tall and adjusting his black belt, looked far smaller than he had 20 minutes ago. The students murmured quietly behind them. Did you see how he moved? He flipped sensei like nothing. That wasn't luck. That's real training, deep training. Tyler heard every whisper and hated every single one. He straightened suddenly, clapping his hands sharply. All right, everyone. Back. 2 positions. We're not done with class. We're done, the brown-haired girl said out loud. Tyler froze. She stepped forward. Voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. You bullied him. You humiliated him. You talked down to him. And he still held back every second. Grant closed his eyes briefly. He didn't want this. Didn't want admiration. He didn't want awe. He wanted to disappear again before more pieces of his past bled through the cracks. But Lily wasn't done. She tugged gently at his sleeve. Dad, how did you do that? The way you moved, the way you flipped him. You told me you just cleaned gyms after school. Grant swallowed hard. Too many eyes, too many questions, too much danger. He stood. Go. We should go, he whispered. Tyler finally snapped back into motion, pointing a finger at Grant. No one leaves, he barked. Not until we settle. This Grant turned his head slightly, his voice calm but edged. It's already settled. The hell it is, Tyler snapped. He stepped forward again, but this time 3 students moved subtly to block his path, not aggressively, not threateningly, just enough to create space. Enough to say, not again. The humiliation burned in Tyler's chest like fire. This is my dojo, he shouted. My rules. You think you can walk in here and I work here? Grant replied. Quietly, the room stilled. Tyler's mouth opened, then closed. He hadn't expected the janitor to respond, certainly not calmly, certainly not in control. Grant continued. I don't want trouble. Came here for a job. Came here to clean. Floors, not cause problems. You caused this, Tyler spat. Grant's voice softened again. No, you did. For the first time since the confrontation began, Tyler had no retort. The brown-haired girl crossed her arms. He gave you 5 chances to stop, her partner added. You shoved him, Sensei. Twice, another student said, and he still. Took it easy. Grant felt heat rise in his cheeks. Not pride, but shame. Shame that he'd let himself slip. Shame that he'd exposed part of the man he used to be. He turned to Lily. Sweetheart, he said softly, let's get you home. She nodded. But her eyes were still searching him like she was flipping through pages of a story. She didn't know she'd been reading. He took her hand gently and began walking toward the exit. The students stepped aside, making a silent path. For him, but Tyler wasn't finished. Hey, he yelled, voice cracking under the pressure. We're not done. You still owe me a real match, a real demonstration. Grant paused at the door. He didn't turn around. He just said for quiet words, You don't want that. Tyler let out a humorless laugh. Oh, I do. And you're going to give it to me, because now I know you've been hiding something, and I'll find out what. Grant's back stiffened. Lily squeezed his hand tighter. Dad, she whispered. He forced a soft smile. It's okay. I'm not going to fight anyone. But Tyler had already crossed a line he couldn't uncross. I'll find out who you really are, Janitor, he hissed. And when I do, you won't be able to hide behind your mop anymore. Grant finally turned his head, just enough to let Tyler see the look in his eyes. Calm, deep dangerous. I'm not hiding, he said quietly. I'm just trying to protect the people I care about. Tyler scoffed. From what? Grant's gaze flicked briefly to Lily, then to the floor, then back to Tyler. For myself. The gym went silent. Lily stared up at him, her voice trembling again. Dad, what does that mean? Grant didn't answer. He just squeezed her hand and walked out of the dojo. The door clicked shut behind them, and inside. Every student slowly turned to look at Tyler, the black belt instructor, who had just been exposed. Not by force, not by violence, by truth. Tyler felt the weight of their stares and boiled. He wasn't going to let this go. Not tonight, not ever. And As he stood there trembling with humiliation and fury, he whispered to himself, "I'll find out who he is." He had no idea how much danger those words were about to unleash. The walk home was quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Heavy quiet. The kind where the world seems to hold its breath. The sidewalk glistened with the last bit of evening rain. Streetlights reflected in puddles like broken stars. Grant held Lily's hand the whole way. She could feel something different in him, like he was holding. Back in Ocean with sheer will, she squeezed his hand. He squeezed back, yet neither of them said a word until they reached the front door of their tiny apartment, the one with the peeling green paint, the dented mailbox, and the faint smell of someone's burnt cooking drifting from a neighbor's window. Grant unlocked the door slowly. "Go wash up, sweetheart," he murmured, forcing warmth into his tone. "I'll make something quick for dinner." Lily hesitated. "Dad, are you mad at me?" That hit him harder than Tyler's shove. He stopped in the doorway, turned fully toward her, knelt down so they were eye level. "Never," he said, softly. "Not once. Not ever." She looked down at her shoes. "Then, why won't you tell me what happened back there?" Because it would break her heart. Because she'd look at him differently. Because it would open a door he'd spent 20 years trying to close. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "It's complicated." "I'm not a little kid," she whispered. "You're my kid," he said, kissing her forehead. "And I promise, I'll tell you one day, just not tonight." She held his gaze for a long, painful moment. Then she nodded. "Okay." She walked toward the bathroom. Grant waited until he heard the door close, until he heard the water running, before he sagged against the wall and rubbed his face with both hands. He hadn't felt this scared in years, not since Vegas, not since Jack, not since the night everything fell apart. He pushed the memory away, like he always did, and forced himself into motion. Dinner. Focus on dinner. That was something real. That was something solid. He opened the fridge, mostly empty, except for a carton of eggs, half a loaf of bread, and leftover pasta from 2 nights ago. Nothing fancy, nothing Instagram-worthy, but it filled a 10-year-old belly and kept the lights on. He set a pot on the stove, turned the burner, tried to breathe, but his mind wouldn't stop replaying. The last hour, Tyler's face when he hit the mat, Lily's voice at the doorway, 20 pairs of eyes, watching him like a ghost from a legend they never knew existed, and worst of all, Tyler's threat. "I'll find out who you are." Grant clenched. The edge of the countertop. He'd gone to great lengths to erase Grant, the Phantom Miller, from the world. No social media, no interviews, no press. He hadn't even kept his old gear. Nothing that tied him to the man he used to be, except the nightmares. Those always came back. The doorbell rang. Grant froze. It was too late for visitors. Too late for anyone from the building. Too late for any good news. He stepped softly toward the door. Body braced without meaning to. The old instincts rising like reflex. He looked through the pufflet. Mrs. Evans, the elderly widow from down the hall, stood there with her grocery bag, her face tight with worry. Grant exhaled and opened the door. "Is everything okay?" he asked gently. "Oh, Grant," she whispered, pressing a hand to her chest. "My Arthur." His sugar dropped again. "He's shaking so badly he can't stand. Could you?" Grant didn't even let her finish. "Of course." He glanced at the bathroom door. "Lily," he called softly. "I'm helping Mr. Evans for a minute. Stay inside, okay?" "Okay, Dad." Grant grabbed his jacket and followed Mrs. Evans down. The hall, helping people that he could handle, violence that he couldn't risk again. When he reached the Evans apartment, he found Arthur collapsed on the sofa, pale and sweating. Grant moved quickly, more confident in medical emergencies than anyone expected from a janitor. Years of corner training with Jack taught him how to keep a man conscious. "Talk to me." "Arthur," he said firmly. "Stay awake." "Damn glucose." Meters lying again, Arthur muttered through shaking hands. Grant reached the kitchen, grabbed apple juice from the fridge, poured a glass, and helped him drink. Slowly, carefully. Within minutes, Arthur's tremors eased. His color returned. His breathing evened out. Mrs. Evans wiped her eyes. "Thank you, Grant. I don't know what we'd do without you." He smiled softly. "Just glad he's okay." She hesitated, you know. "Lily mentioned you were almost in a fight at the dojo today." His smile faded. Kids exaggerate. Looked at him for a long moment, old eyes seeing more than he wanted them to see. "You're a good man," she said. "But good men sometimes have storms inside them. Just be careful." He nodded, throat tight. After making sure Arthur was stable, Grant walked back to his apartment, but halfway down the hall, he stopped, because someone was sitting on the floor by his door. A tall, tattooed man in a hoodie, elbows on his knees. Head down, waiting, not threatening, not tense, just waiting. Grant's instincts flared, every muscle locking into readiness. Then the man lifted his head, and Grant's heart dropped, because he recognized him immediately, and the years fell away. In an instant, Jesus. Grant whispered, "Marcus." Marcus the Bulldog Reyes, former middleweight champion, one of Grant's closest friends. A man who disappeared from the fight world the same year Grant did, but he looked different now. Older, rougher, like he'd lived through hell. Marcus stood slowly. "Took me a while to find you," he said quietly. "You didn't make it easy." Grant didn't move. "Why are you here?" Marcus exhaled. "Because you're in danger, brother." The hallway tilted. Grant felt the old world closing in, wrapping around his throat like a ghost he'd never escaped. Marcus stepped closer. "I saw a video," he said, voice low. "Someone recorded you at that dojo tonight. It's spreading. Fast. People are talking." Grant's blood ran cold. No. He had been careful. So careful. How could Anne then he knew? Tyler, of course it was Tyler. Marcus held up his phone, and there it was. A blurry clip of Grant flipping Tyler. The caption, "Janitor destroys black belt." Who is this guy? Already climbing views. Already being shared. Already threatening to drag. Back into the spotlight he ran from Grant steadied. Himself against the wall, breathing slow and controlled. "Grant," Marcus said, stepping closer, "listen to me. The people who ruined your career? The ones you ran from?" Grant didn't blink. They saw the video too. The hallway spun. His ears rang. Lily's laugh echoed in his memory, soft, innocent, unaware of the storm now clawing toward her life. Marcus lowered his voice to almost a whisper. "They know where you are." Grant's vision narrowed to a single point, and somewhere deep inside him, a place he'd buried with everything else, the fighter woke up. The courthouse felt colder the next morning, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the venom of the previous day. The echo of the crowd outside pulsed through the thick doors in grayer, louder, hungrier than before. They wanted answers now, not later. Now, Marianne stepped out of the black SUV with sunglasses on, flanked by 2 attorneys and a publicist who clearly hadn't slept. Flashes erupted instantly. Microphones shot forward like spears. Her chin stayed lifted, expression trained into a mask of calm superiority. But her hands trembled just enough for Camilla to notice from across the entryway. A small, vicious satisfaction flickered through Camilla's chest. The stepmother was cracking, but satisfaction didn't last. Not when there was still a dead father, a destroyed family, and a courtroom full of people waiting to decide whether the maid who raised her would go to prison for something she didn't, or whether the truth would finally break free. Camilla stood by Amina, shielding her slightly as they moved through the reporters. Amina kept her head down, clutching a worn rosary in one hand. She looked nothing like the criminal the media had painted her to be. Instead, she looked like someone's mother, someone's aunt, someone's tired, frightened caretaker who had loved too deeply in a house that treated love as a threat. A reporter shouted, "Camilla, did your father trust Amina with everything? Did he know she was hiding something?" Camilla stopped walking. Her voice cut through the chaos like a whip. "She hid nothing," she said. "The only person my father feared in that house was Marianne. A wave of murmurs rippled across the crowd. Marianne froze mid-step, lips tightening. Their eyes met, two storms colliding. Inside the courtroom, the tension was sharp enough to slice the air. Marianne sat proudly next to her expensive attorneys. Her posture perfect, her smile polite, rehearsed. Amina sat with her public defender, a man who looked too overwhelmed and too underfunded to stand against the machine in front of him. Camilla slid into the row behind Mina and leaned forward. "Not leaving," she whispered. "Not today. Not ever." Mina squeezed her hand silently. As the trial resumed, the prosecutor presented his airtight timeline, emphasizing every moment that supposedly placed Amina near the scene, every fingerprint, every overheard argument, every out-of-context statement crafted to twist a woman's fear into motive. Camilla's stomach churned. She could feel the unfairness physically, like fist pressing into her lungs. But then everything shifted. Her turn on the witness stand arrived. The prosecutor approached with a smile that felt like a trap. "Ms. Hale, you testified yesterday that your stepmother controlled your father's medicine and finances. Do you have proof of that?" Camilla exhaled slowly. "Yes, emails, bank transfers, security logs, caregiver forms she forged, and surveillance footage that mysteriously disappeared the week my father's symptoms worsened." A ripple passed through the room. The prosecutor's smile faltered. "And where," he said stiffly, "did you obtain these materials?" "Father trusted me to review the business accounts." Marianne didn't know he had a backup. Gasps filled the space. Marianne shifted sharply in her seat. Camilla continued, voice steady, strong. "The night he died, my father called me. He said he felt sick, drowsy, not normal. He wanted a doctor. He sounded scared. He also said one more thing. He told me Marianne had given him the wrong pills. He didn't know if it was a mistake." Room fell silent, dead silent. Even the judge lowered her pen. The prosecutor quickly objected, hearsay. But the damage was done. The jury heard it. The gallery heard it. Marianne heard it, and her mask cracked. A thin line of sweat rolled down her forehead. Camilla stepped down from the stand and returned to her seat behind Amina. She felt Amina's trembling hand reach for hers again. Camilla held on, grounding her as the world shifted around them. During the lunch recess, the courthouse steps were chaos, people arguing, shouting, speculating. Camilla stayed far from the noise, taking Amina to a bench behind the building, where trees muffled the sound. Amina sat heavily, her voice barely above a whisper. "You should not be doing all this for me." "You raised me," Camilla said. "You fed me. You protected me. You cleaned up every mess my father and Marianne made. You stood by me when no one else would. This is the least I can do." Amina's eyes filled. "Your father loved you more than anything. He wanted you safe." "And you kept me safe," Camilla replied. "Now it's my turn." Before Amina could respond, footsteps approached. Was a man in a gray suit, a nervous man, glancing around as if afraid he'd be seen. "Ms. Hale," he said quietly. I work in the medical office your stepmother used. I saw your testimony. I have something you need to see." Millis' pulse spiked. "What is it?" she asked. He swallowed hard. "Marianne requested early refills of your father's medications. Twice, and signed them with a forged physician's signature." He exhaled shakily. "I was told to keep it quiet, but after hearing what you said, I can't." "Can you?" "Testify?" Camilla asked. He hesitated, fear flickering in his eyes. Then he nodded. Double quotes. "Yes, I can." When court resumed, everything moved at lightning speed. The man took the stand. He presented documents, forms, verification logs. The evidence was damning, direct, undeniable. Marianne's lawyer scrambled, objected, argued, but they couldn't change the truth. The defense attorney Amina is overwhelmed, wrinkled suit wearing. Defender stood taller than he ever had. "Before your honor," he said, voice firm, "this is a clear pattern of deception by the defendant's wife. Not the maid, not the caregiver, the wife." Marianne slammed her palm on the table. "This is absurd," she snapped.
Oh.
"She killed him. She hated me. Control yourself, the judge warned sharply. Marianne's jaw clenched so tightly the muscles twitched. Amina stared forward with wide, fearful eyes. She looked like a woman sinking underwater, hoping the surface was still within reach. Camilla leaned forward and whispered, "It's turning. Hold on." But the storm wasn't over, not even close. Because when the defense requested to admit the financial records Camilla had found, Marianne stood abruptly. "I'm not doing this," she said. Her voice was shaking, no frantic. "You're not pinning this on me. You're not ruining my life because of his daughter and that," she pointed at Amina, face contorted with fury. "That servant who never knew her place." Gasps exploded. Through the room, the judge slammed her gavel. "Mrs. Hale, sit down." But Marianne didn't. She kept ranting, unraveling, piece by piece. Her composure shredding before the eyes of the jury. "He loved me," she screamed. "He was going to change the will anyway. He knew I deserved more. He knew. Her voice broke. The courtroom froze. Her attorneys slowly lowered their heads. They knew. Everyone knew. She had just revealed everything. And it was over. Amina burst into tears, covering her face. Camilla wrapped her arms tightly around her, whispering, "You're free. You're free. You're free." Marianne was escorted out as she screamed at everyone, the judge, the attorneys, the reporters, the walls themselves, her perfectly curated life collapsing in real time, and the world watched. When court adjourned for the day, the sun was beginning to set, casting gold across the courthouse steps. People cheered as Amina exited, reporters swarming, asking for reactions, comments. Anything. Amina didn't speak. She simply lifted her face to the sky, letting the sunlight wash over her. A free woman in everything but paperwork. Camilla stood beside her, holding her hand. For the first time in months, she could breathe without pain. The backlash against Marianne was only beginning, and the truth was finally rising from places it had been buried. But Camilla knew one thing, with chilling certainty. The war wasn't won yet. The next day, the real reckoning would begin. Camilla barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marianne's face sweat, glistening on her forehead, eyes wide, voice cracking as the courtroom walls closed in on her. It should have felt like victory. It should have felt like justice. But all Camilla felt was unfinished. Business. Because a meltdown wasn't a confession. Not legally. Not enough to free Amina. And until the judge declared it officially, the danger still hovered over them like a shadow ready to swallow the light at any moment. At dawn, the city outside her apartment window was still and gray, the kind of quiet that felt like it was holding its breath. Camilla stood at the glass with a cup of black coffee, thinking about her father's voice on the phone that night, the fear, the confusion, the trust. "Wrong pills," it whispered. Those two words changed everything. She shook off the memory and turned toward the living room. Mina slept on the sofa, curled under a blanket, her rosary clutched tightly in her hand. The sight hit Camilla hard, not in pity, but in a kind of fierce devotion. This woman had been her anchor for more than half her childhood. Now it was her turn to anchor her. Camilla ate breakfast eggs, toast tea, and gently shook Amina awake. "Big day," she whispered. Amina blinked up at her with tired, hopeful eyes. "Do you think?" "Yes," Camilla said, more confidently than she felt. "Today is the day." They arrived early to the courthouse, hoping to avoid the morning swarm. It's a bad idea. Reporters were already there, thick as smoke, hungry for drama. "Camilla, is Marianne going to be arrested today? Is Amina prepared for cross-examination? About the will? Did she alter it? Do you believe your stepmother poisoned your father?" Camilla kept walking, jaw tight, one arm around Amina as cameras flashed from every angle. Inside, the courtroom had a different energy charged. Restless, like a storm waiting for its cue. The jury filed in looking unusually alert. They had seen the news headlines. They'd watched the meltdown clips circulating online. They knew the world was watching. Marianne's seat at the defense table was empty. Her lawyers whispered among themselves. Glancing anxiously at the door, Camilla felt a flicker of dread. Then, as if on cue, Mary Ann entered. Her transformation was startling. Gone was the designer dress. Gone was the flawless hair. Gone was the icy smile she wore like armor. Today her hair was tied back in a loose, messy bun. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes swollen from crying. She held her arms tight across her body, shrinking into herself as she walked. She didn't meet. Camilla's gaze didn't meet the jury's gaze, didn't meet anyone's. She simply sat down and stared at the table. Her lawyers leaned toward her. She barely nodded. The judge entered. Everyone rose, and just like that, the day began. Mary Ann's attorney went first, trying to regain control, speaking about emotional distress and misinterpretation of statements and an understandable outburst during a strenuous trial, but the jury didn't flinch. They stared at Mary Ann with quiet, unimpressed eyes. Camilla felt the shift. The judge called for the defense to proceed. Camilla's public defender stood, visibly steadier than he'd been in days. "Your Honor," he began, "the witness list has changed. The prosecution has been notified." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Go on. We have a new witness who came forward yesterday, a key witness." The courtroom buzzed. Even Mary Ann looked up, eyes darting nervously. The door opened. A man walked in tall, wearing a Navy maintenance uniform, holding a folded piece of paper in one hand. His face was familiar. Camilla's breath hitched. The hospital janitor. The man who'd helped her years ago when her father first got sick. The man who had overheard something she had forgotten in her grief. Till now, he glanced at her briefly before taking the stand. After being sworn in, he shifted nervously. I wasn't going to say anything. I didn't want trouble. But I saw the news last night. I figured, maybe it's time. "Please tell the court what you witnessed," the attorney prompted. He swallowed hard. "I overheard a conversation a few days before Mr. Hale died between the defendant, Mrs. Hall, and her lawyer. I was cleaning the corridor near the private office. Didn't know anyone was there." Mary Ann stiffened violently, eyes going wide. The room went dead silent. "What did you hear?" the attorney asked. The janitor unfolded the paper with trembling fingers, notes he had written that very night. "Tucked away out of fear," she said. "The will needs to be updated immediately. He's getting worse and he's starting to suspect something." Then she said something like, "I just need him calm enough to sign." The courtroom erupted. Mary Ann shot to her feet. "He's lying." The judge slammed the gavel. "Mrs. Hale, sit down or you will be removed." Mary Ann sank back into her chair, gripping the edges like they were the only things keeping her from falling. The janitor continued. Her lawyer told her to be careful, that too much medication could look suspicious. And she said, "I wrote this down," she said. "I know how much he can handle." Camilla felt her whole body go cold. Amina's hand clamped over her mouth as tears streamed down her face. The jury wasn't just listening, they were leaning forward, absorbing every word. The attorney stepped closer to the witness stand. "Sir, to be clear, Mrs. Hale spoke about controlling Mr. Hale's medication." "Yes." "About calming him enough to sign legal documents?" "Yes." "And about knowing how much he could handle, in reference to medication dosage?" "Yes." Another explosion of murmurs filled the room. Mary Ann's attorney stood abruptly. "Your Honor, this is hearsay," the judge cut him off. "Not today, counselor. Not with handwritten notes written contemporaneously with the event." Overruled. The defense attorney sat down, defeated. Mary Ann sank into her chair, hands shaking violently. Camilla could feel the momentum, no, not subtle, not gentle, but like a wave crashing down with unstoppable force. The prosecution tried to claw back control, calling Mary Ann to the stand to clarify. Terrible move. She walked stiffly to the chair, her composure gone, her voice raw. Double quotes. "Mrs. Hale," the prosecutor began softly, "did you ever manipulate your husband's medication?" "No," she snapped. "Did you ever forge his signature?" "No." "Did you ask for early refills?" "That was for his comfort." "Did you benefit financially from his death?" I was his wife. She shouted, voice cracking. Course I had a right, so you admit you stood to gain. Her face drained of color. No, I mean, didn't this is twisted, and the will he supposedly wanted to sign. Why was it unsigned at the time of his death? Marianne's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The prosecutor took a step closer. Mrs. Hale, did your husband refuse to sign the new will? Silence, Mrs. Hale. Her voice finally broke through. Barely audible. He said he wanted more time. What was your response? Marianne trembled. I told him he shouldn't wait, that it was in his best interest, that he owed me. A pin-drop silence fell so heavy. It felt like gravity doubled. The prosecutor leaned in. Owed you what, Mrs. Hale? She swallowed. A life, he promised me. But he didn't sign. No. And you knew time was running out. No, that's not. And you had control of his medication. Marianne shook her head desperately. I didn't kill him. But you didn't help him either. Her face crumpled. The dam finally broke. He was going to leave me with nothing, she whispered, voice cracking apart. I gave him everything. I waited. I sacrificed. I deserved, she choked on the last word. Deserved. The jury heard it. The judge heard it. The gallery heard it. And Camilla felt a tear slide down her cheek, not for Marianne, but for her father, who had died believing he was in the care of someone who loved him. The courtroom adjourned in chaos, reporters sprinting out like a stampede. The judge's final warning echoed through the room. Tomorrow, the jury deliberates. Amina leaned into Camilla, sobbing quietly into her shoulder. Camilla held her tightly, whispering, It's happening. The truth is finally here. As they stepped outside, blinding flashlights exploding in their faces, crowds screaming from every direction, Camilla realized something chilling. This wasn't the end. Tomorrow would bring the verdict. But tonight the world was about to erupt.
The morning of the verdict felt unreal. Too bright, too loud, too sharp, as if the world itself knew something irreversible was about to happen. Camilla stood outside the courthouse with Amina, both of them holding styrofoam cups of hot tea that neither had touched. The crowd was twice the size of the date before. News vans parked shoulder to shoulder, reporters weaving through barricades, microphones raised like weapons. People held signs. Some demanded justice, some demanded answers, some simply wanted blood. Amina shivered under her shawl, and Camilla draped her coat around her shoulders. It's almost over, she whispered. Amina nodded, though her eyes were distant, haunted by years of blame, by sleepless nights in a cold cell, by the memory of a man she had loved like a son. Whatever happens, Camilla said softly, you don't go through it alone. Not anymore. When the courthouse doors opened, the crowd surged, security tightened, flashbulbs strobed across their faces. But Camilla walked straight through the chaos with a kind of rooted determination she didn't recognize in herself until now. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with electric tension. Marianne sat at the defense table, but she was barely recognizable. Her expensive blouse was wrinkled, her hair unkempt, and her hands shook uncontrollably. She kept wiping under her eyes as if trying to erase the red marks left by hours of crying. Her lawyers whispered urgently, but she didn't hear them. Her gaze was fixed on the jury box, tense, terrified, hollow. Camilla wondered if this was the first time Marianne had ever feared consequences. They waited. Minutes felt like hours. Then the bailiff announced, "All rise for the jury." Everyone stood. The jurors filed into their seats, expressions unreadable. A heavy, suffocating silence fell. The judge looked at the foreperson. "Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." The world held its breath. The foreperson stood, holding the verdict form like a piece of fragile glass. In the case of the State versus Amina Yusuf, on the charge of second-degree murder, Amina squeezed Camilla's hand so hard it hurt. "We find the defendant not guilty." The courtroom exploded. The sound hit like thunder. People gasping, shouting, crying. Reporters scrambled for the exit to blast the news across every platform. Amina collapsed forward, hands over her face, sobbing so hard she couldn't breathe. Camilla wrapped her arms around her, whispering, "It's done. You're free. You're free." Even the judge had to slam the gavel repeatedly to regain control. "Order! Order!" But the world had already cracked open. Across the room, Marianne let out a strangled sound, half scream, half sob, and stumbled to her feet. Her lawyers tried to pull her down, but she pushed them off with a burst of panicked strength. "She did this!" she shrieked, pointing at Amina. "She's manipulating all of you! She's the liar, not me! She wanted him to die! She wanted the money! She—" The judge thundered, "Mrs. Hale, sit down or you will be removed from this court!" But Marianne wasn't listening. Her mind had snapped clean down the middle, not from guilt alone, but from the sudden realization that the world she built brick by brick had just been demolished in front of a live audience. She clawed at her lawyer's arm, tears streaking down her face. "They can't take everything from me! Tell them they can't take everything!" Camilla stared at her, not with satisfaction, not even with anger, but with a hollow sadness. Because this was a woman who had once been glamorous, composed, icy in her confidence, and now she was unraveling like a thread pulled too tightly for too long. The judge spoke over the chaos. "Bailiff, remove the defendant from the courtroom." Marianne screamed as two officers took her arms and walked her out. Her cries echoed down the halls long after she disappeared behind the door. When the room finally calmed, the judge turned to Amina. "Miss Yusuf, the court acknowledges your wrongful arrest and the trauma you have endured. You are formally released." Amina bowed her head, hands trembling. "Thank you, Your Honor." It was over. Except it wasn't. Not truly. Not for Camilla. Not yet. As the courtroom emptied and the world outside roared in celebration, Camilla stayed in her seat, staring at the polished wood of the bench where her father had once testified in business cases, strong and proud. In her mind she heard his voice, the warm, steady, reassuring tone she had known since childhood. "You did good, sweetheart." She closed her eyes. For the first time since he died, she felt something close to peace. A soft hand touched her arm. "Camilla?" Amina stood beside her, clutching the rosary. Her eyes weren't filled with fear anymore, or shame or doubt. They were filled with gratitude. And something like love. "Let's go home," Camilla whispered. But outside the courthouse, the world wasn't ready to let them disappear quietly. Cheers erupted the moment Amina stepped out. People lined the barricades holding signs, crying, applauding. Strangers reached out to touch her hand, to tell them they believed in her, to say they always knew something didn't add up. News anchors shouted into cameras, "She's been exonerated! The truth about the Hale case exclusively on our network. Public opinion turns against widow Marianne Hale." Camilla helped Amina through the crowd, shielding her from the crush of microphones and flashing lenses. Reporters pushed forward. "Camilla, do you have a statement? How do you feel about Marianne's arrest? What's next for you and Amina?" Camilla didn't stop walking, but she did say one thing, one sentence that silenced the press for a moment. "My father deserved the truth. Today, he finally got it." Security parted the sea of bodies so they could reach the car. Amina got inside first, wiping away tears that couldn't stop. Camilla followed, and the doors shut behind them with a heavy thud. For the first time in months, quiet wrapped around them like a blanket. The driver pulled away from the courthouse, and the crowd grew smaller in the rearview window until it vanished completely. Amina exhaled shakily. "Camilla, I don't know how to thank you." "You already did," Camilla said softly. "You survived." "No," Amina shook her head. "You brought the truth to light. You gave me my life back." Camilla looked at her, eyes warm. "You gave mine too. All those years after my mom died, you kept me whole. I never forgot." Tears spilled again down Amina's cheeks. "Your father would be proud of you." Camilla nodded. "I hope so." They drove through the city as late morning sunlight burst through the clouds, washing the streets in gold. People hurried along sidewalks, unaware that something monumental had just ended and something new was beginning. When they reached the apartment, Amina paused outside the door. "This is the first time I've walked into a home without fear in so long," she whispered. Camilla unlocked it gently. "Then, let's make it the first of many." Inside, the place felt different, brighter, lighter, as if the walls themselves breathed easier. Camilla helped Amina sit, made tea, turned on soft music. And for the first time since this nightmare began, they smiled without forcing it. But the world wasn't quite done with them yet. Camilla's phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. She opened it. Her breath caught. It was a document. A scanned copy of a letter. Handwritten. Signed by her father. Dated 2 weeks before his death. Her hands trembled as she read the first line.
"If something happens to me, please protect Amina. She is not just a housekeeper. She is family." Tears blurred her vision. Amina whispered, "What is it, hija?" Camilla handed her the phone. Amina read the words and broke down, sobbing into her hands. He knew. He always knew who loved him and who didn't. Camilla sank beside her on the couch, wrapping her arms around the woman who had raised her, protected her, and now stood beside her at the end of the most painful fight of their lives. The truth had won. The lies had crumbled. Justice, slow and imperfect, had finally come home. And for the first time since her father died, Camilla felt the future opening, wide, unbroken, and full of light. The final reckoning wasn't the courtroom. It was this moment. 2 women who had lost everything, finally getting it back. Together.